Hey, Calibrate family, don't make these mistakes with circular saws. Let's talk about it right after this. All right, circular saws. These are the kings of the power tool world. Well, at least one of them. But you gotta be careful how you handle them because one mistake can cost you more than you bargained for. Number one, after you finish using the saw, what do? You place it down on your surface just like that. That's the wrong move. You don't want to do that. I've seen circular saws get put down while they're still running. This is the upper guard of the blade, and this is the lower guard of the blade. It retracts when you're cutting. But a lot of times, if you're not being safe, you'll place the circular saw blade down and accidentally retract the blade guard. Well, that's why you should never rest the saw blade down. If that blade guard retracts and the blade's still spinning, let's hope it only damages the surface that you rested on, not your feet, hands, or somebody else's. Fortunately, this circular saw and a lot of modern circular saws have a brake system that stops that blade the minute you release your finger from the trigger. But that still should be no excuse to rest the blade on the ground or table or whatever surface you're working on like this. Circular saws have been known to take off and run over people's feet. So why even take that chance? Always place your circular saw on its side when you're done until the next use. Mistake number two, walking or carrying your circular saw with your finger on the trigger. Well, what happens if you trip and fall? Your reflex is going to kick in, and the only thing you're going to be thinking about is how you're going to break that fall. You're not even going to be thinking about your finger on that trigger. And most likely, you're going to tense up and pull the trigger. And you can only guess what's going to happen after that. Just keep all your fingers on the handle just like this. Leave that trigger alone when you're carrying it from place to place. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. DIY, you're getting ready to cut your piece of wood, and you said, I'm going to clamp them down on both sides. That's going to make it more secure. Wood's not going to fall all over the place once I cut. Wrong move. You actually want your waste side or whatever side that you don't want to fall. Reason being, there's something called kickback when it comes to saws. Kickback is when you're cutting your material and the saw suddenly jerks back towards you. And it's not just a light jerk. It's a very aggressive, sudden jerk by the saw, and it can actually cause injury from the blunt force. Not to mention the spinning blade, which can do a whole lot of damage, and it can even fracture your wrist. When you have your workpiece clamped on both sides and you cut through it, what's going to happen is as you cut through, the workpiece is going to cave in at the cut line. That's going to pinch your blade as you're cutting and cause kickback. That's why you don't want to clamp both sides. You want to let your waist side fall away. Because it's clamped on both sides, the wood would fall in at the cut line and end up pinching your blade at the cut line, causing kickback. So if you're clamping your material down, only use one clamp on one side. And that brings us to mistake number 4, standing right behind the circular saw when you're cutting. You never know when kickback's going to happen. So why stand right behind your saw when you're cutting? You want to move to the side, right? To give yourself clearance just in case it does happen. Mistake number 5 is cutting with dull blades. That's definitely going to cause kickback. How do you know if your blade is dull? Just look at the cuts. They're going to be rough. They're going to have burn marks. You're going to find yourself having to push through the wood or material. It's going to be a lot more resistance. If the saw vibrates more than usual, which is really shouldn't vibrate at all, that's a sign of dull blades. Just look at the teeth of your blade. If there's a lot of nicks, if they're rounded off rather than sharp, that's definitely a dull blade. And you can also listen to the motor. If it sounds like it's straining, that's another sign. A sharp blade is not going to leave a lot of splinters. A dull blade will. Here's a trick. Take your thumbnail and drag it across one of the teeth. If it feels like it's getting caught on the tooth, that means it's a sharp blade. If it just slides across the tooth real smooth and it doesn't feel like your nail is at least scratching or caught on the tooth, you got a dull blade. And when you're doing that, proceed with caution. Mistake number 6, you're setting the depth of the blade too deep for your material. That's way too deep. The blade doesn't have to extend that deep into the material. All that's doing is creating more work for the saw to do. The more blade that has to go through the wood means the saw has to work harder. which also increases the likelihood of kickback. Not to mention, that's more exposed saw that can come in contact with your surface or you. How deep should your blade go? That blade should extend less than 1/4 of an inch beyond your material. So just go to your depth adjustment scale and make the appropriate adjustment. Here's another big one, using the wrong blade. You don't want to use a wood blade on metal or vice versa. Or you don't want to use a ripping blade to make crosscuts. Circular saw blades can get very specific, especially when it comes to tooth count. That's how many teeth are on the blade. The fewer teeth on the blade means the blade's going to cut faster, but it's going to leave a rougher cut. Those are used for ripping lumber. The more teeth a blade has, those are usually for crosscuts. They leave a smoother finish and they cut a lot slower. So if you use a ripping blade, the one with less teeth, for crosscuts, you're going to have a lot of splinters and you're going to have more rough edges. And if you use a crosscut blade, the one with more teeth, for rip cuts, that's just going to cause the blade to overheat and it's probably going to stall on you in the middle of a cut. Also, don't make the mistake of getting a blade that's too big or too small for your saw. Obviously, a blade that's too small won't reach the depth that you need it to reach for your material. Most saws take a 7 1/4 inch blade like this one, but don't take that for granted. You want to make sure that you get the right size for your saw. You also want to get a blade with the right curve. What is that? That's simply the width of the blade. It's the width of the cut the blade makes in your material. A blade with a thinner kerf is going to take out less material. That's going to require less power from the saw, and those are usually good for lower powered saws or cordless battery powered models like this one. Blades with a wider kerf are better for more powerful saws and those long rip cuts. So consider all those factors when it comes to your blade, because the wrong kerf can cause your blade to stall or even go off track. Another mistake, forcing your saw through the material. You definitely don't want to force the saw. You want to let the saw do the work. Forcing the saw could cause it to stall or bind or overheat. Forcing it could even cause you to lose control, which is not a good thing, obviously. And if you're into the kickback thing, go ahead and keep forcing the saw, because that'll definitely cause kickback. How about this one? Dropping a spinning blade onto your material, or starting in the middle of a cut instead of starting on the edge. You always want to start from the edge of your material. You don't want to do plunge cuts with your circular saw. Now, I know you've probably seen people do it, but it's not the safest way to handle a circular saw. Anything that may cause you to lose control of the saw, even in the slightest, you should avoid. That includes that movement I just described, dropping it in the middle of a cut while the blade's spinning. Also, this thing has 2 handles, has one here and one here. If you really want to be safe with your saw, you want to use both handles. I know you see people out there using one hand on this back handle, and they seem like they're just whizzing through their material, and they just might be. They've been doing it a long time, and we tend to ignore some of the safety precautions. But this handle's here for a reason. It's to provide the ultimate stability when you're using the saw. So use it, both hands on the wheel, pun intended. It's all about having the optimal grip and control. Oh yeah, and remember that blade guard, the lower one that you can retract? Some people actually remove it because to them it's a nuisance. Don't do that. Leave the blade guard on. It's there for a reason, and that's pretty clear. Lastly, never use gloves with power tools, especially circular saws. Why? Because these things have motors and they have spinning parts. Gloves can get caught up in them along with what's in the gloves, which is your hands. So don't use gloves with power tools. There you have it, guys, a circular saw. One of the greatest inventions in my opinion. Not without its risks. Be careful out there. See you next time.